Who spoke to Zimbabwe's opposition leader, the Movement for Democratic Changes, Nelson Chamisa.
Well, very unfortunate that we are getting these very reckless statements from the leadership of the country at a time when our country is in very dire and serious circumstances in terms of corruption, in terms of the indicators economically, in terms of the political stalemate and crisis we have, the human rights abuses we have, the divisive nature of our state.
Why do you think that there's been an escalation of this firm hand from the authorities in recent weeks?
Well, it's basically the legitimacy question. Where there's no legitimacy, force increases. Where the system or the state is not in unison or working with the people, with the citizens, there is likely to be a lot of suspicion. Instead of citizens being treated as stakeholders, citizens are now being treated as stakeholders, as suspects, and as people who must be targeted and eliminated, defined as bad apples or wrong elements. This is basically an indication of a fragile state, of a disputed state, of a state that is running a banana republic, where citizens have been relegated to circumstances of being the periphery, without necessarily being the center of decision-making, where citizens are supposed to be at the core of the decisions of a government. So we are seeing that democratic space is being eroded. Citizens are not being allowed to freely express themselves in terms of the constitution of our country. Demonstrations are legal. Demonstrations and expressions, of fundamental freedoms is something that is enshrined in the Constitution. But we are seeing the discrediting of that space and disallowing of that fundamental right.
But are demonstrations allowed during COVID-19? Because there are regulations that citizens must abide by, and so surely the authorities have to stop citizens to protect them from themselves.
Nothing is about the Constitution. The Constitution, in terms of Section 59, allows citizens to freely express themselves, of course, with the due regard to circumstances of social distancing in terms of the COVID regulations. So, but nothing takes away fundamental freedoms. We've seen over time that most of the regimes are beginning to hide behind the veneer of the pandemic, to also extend authoritarianism, to also entrench authoritarian rule, and making sure that they subtract from the citizens' rights, and that is what we've seen in Zimbabwe. There's nothing that stops Zimbabweans from peacefully expressing themselves. Nothing overrides the Constitution.
All right, some people have been sending messages on social media, and they're saying that, Mr. Chamisa, you are sending your people out there knowing that they'll be beaten, knowing that they'll be arrested.
Well, one most important thing I must emphasize is that I don't have people. But when we do express ourselves as a people, as Zimbabweans, this is not a solo project. It's a unified approach. It is no longer about ZANU-PF. It's no longer about MDC. It's now about the Project Zimbabwe. It's about our collective being. It's about our collective Ubuntu, our dignity. When you have citizens who have nowhere to go in terms of refuge, especially in the context of their government, you then begin to question what else can citizens do. And when citizens find a way of peacefully expressing themselves against corruption, against bad governance, against human rights abuses, that cannot be a basis to then take away their freedoms, or to then abuse them, to expose them to the vagaries of torture, intimidation, beatings, abductions, and some of the things we have never seen, where we have gone back to Stone Age politics, Stone Age tactics in governance, using shambles against citizens, kicking citizens as if you are kicking a soccer ball. That tells you that something is fundamentally wrong in the minds of those who are supposed to superintend upon the affairs of men.